Hello, my YouTube comrades. I am Bmanlegoboy, and welcome back to Movie Reviews with yours truly. So, today I will be reviewing Cars 3. Now, I bet you guys are wondering, why are you reviewing Cars 3 so late? Well, I wanted to see it earlier, but when the film came out, I was at Disneyland and in California, so we couldn't go to the movie theaters, and we had a lot to do when we came back. And my cousin is here visiting, and he hasn't seen the movie yet, so my mom wanted to hold off until my cousin came to see it. So, after over a month of its release, I've finally seen it, and I'm here to review with it for you guys. Now, there will be spoilers in this for those of you who haven't seen the film, but I am hoping that for those of you who do want to see Cars 3, you've already seen it. But if you haven't, there will be spoilers, so give you a few seconds to click off the video. Alright, now, let's get into the plot. So, at the beginning of the film, we catch up with Lightning McQueen and Mater, who is inside McQueen's private truck. And he, at the very beginning of the film, he says the exact same words he did when we very first heard his voice in the first Cars movie. He said, "Speed, I am speed." And then it shows the cars going by, and then he says, "One winner, 42 losers." Except this time he says, "I really used to say that?" And then he loses concentration, and he opens his eyes, and Mater's right in front of him, and then they have a conversation about privacy and all that. Mater backs out, and he tells everyone in the area, give McQueen some peace and quiet. He's having a moment here. And then he reviews his concentration, and then about a few seconds later, he goes out onto the track, and they have the first race of the movie. And McQueen is close to two racers, one of them being the new Dynaco race car, number 42. I think his name was Bobby? Yeah. And then he was friends with another race car, and at the end of every race, whoever won, the other one would prank the winner. Like, first off, when McQueen won the first race, he blew, like, fire extinguisher in his face, and then when Bobby won the next race, Lightning McQueen would inflate his tires so much that it looked like the giant wheels that you drive on a bike that floats on top of the ocean. And it's really funny. And then in the third race is when the main villain of the film comes in, Jackson Storm. Now, from that race on, he keeps winning races and Lightning keeps losing. And there are a lot of new generation cars coming into the races, and a lot of the old cars are now retiring, but McQueen doesn't want to retire. He wants to keep going. And so on the last race of the season, he pushes his best to try and beat Storm, but he can't do it. He crashes like we saw in the teaser trailer that was released in November of last year. And he crashes really bad, and then the movie fades to black. And then we pick up 4 months later at Radiator Springs. Everyone's just going about their business, and McQueen is in the old warehouse where Doc Hudson kept all of his stuff. And he was watching a film about when Doc first crashed, and then they kicked him out of racing. And they brought a little montage back from the first movie when Doc told Lightning about the wreck of 1954 and how he said, you know what they said when I came back and was ready to race? Your history. Move right on to the next rookie. And they literally took the exact same words Paul Dobbs or whoever... No, that's not it. Whoever voices Doc Hudson. Paul Newman, that's who voiced Doc in the first film. They took the exact same words Paul Newman said in the first film and then put it into the third film. And I actually thought that was kind of nice. And they actually added a few sequences of Doc with him talking that we never saw in the first film. And I was thinking, whoa, how did they get that into the film? Because Paul Newman's dead, which is why we didn't see him, which is why we didn't see Doc in the second film either, because Paul Newman died, and so the Disney and Pixar just decided to cut Doc out of the franchise completely. And I was actually really sad to hear that because I really like Doc. And the fact that his legacy still goes on throughout the next two films is really nice. That they're doing that to honor him and Paul Newman. So Sally, Lightning's girlfriend, comes in and asks how he's doing, and he admits he can't do this anymore. If he does the same old thing on the track, he's just going to keep losing, and Sally suggests to just change it up and try something new. McQueen decides to do that and contacts his sponsors, Rusty and Dusty of Rusty's, and he announces that he's going to be doing some training on trying to beat Jackson Storm, and then he goes to the new Rusty's training center somewhere on the East Coast. So they have to go all the way across the coast, which is actually kind of weird considering that Lightning lives in Radiator Springs in California. And when he gets there, they have a whole exhibit dedicated to him, and they even mentioned Doc in there. Now, the person who built the place is a very big fan of Lightning McQueen. His name is Mr. Sterling, and when he arrives, he finds out Rusty and Dusty actually sold Rusty's to Mr. Sterling. And I was actually a little shocked to hear that. And so, Lightning McQueen, Rusty, and Dusty say their goodbyes. They have a good laugh. And Lightning McQueen then immediately starts to train like Jackson Storm does, with all the high-tech racing, the training simulator, wind tunnels, virtual reality, all treadmills, all that sort of stuff. And then we're finally introduced to the new sort of main character of the film. And that is Cruz Ramirez. Now, she is a trainer at the Rusty's training center, and she's training these 3 different cars, and she then starts training McQueen in very weird ways, like meditation and all that. And she even tries to get him to dance, which was really awkward at first. And I was like, and he was like, what does this have to do with training for racing? And as the story goes along, Lightning just wants to get on the simulator that Jackson Storm normally just goes on. And of course, he does go on it, but not with enough training. He ends up crashing into the screen like we saw in one of the trailers, and then the entire facility power goes out. And then Cruz talks to Mr. Sterling about giving Lightning another chance, and then Lightning goes in and talks to Mr. Sterling, and he introduces Lightning about the whole new merchandise about him. And then Sterling breaks the news, saying he's not gonna sponsor him racing because his racing days are coming to an end. Lightning doesn't want to accept that. He knows he can keep going, and he says, the way that Cruz is training me isn't good enough. I have to actually get out outside or do something that'll actually help me train. Not doing meditation and all that sort of stuff. And the first race of the season, which is the Florida 500, is coming up in about a week. And he makes a deal with Sterling that if he loses the Florida 500, he retires for good, and he starts selling all the merchandise stuff. So, and then of course they have a deal, and then Sterling says, someone has to go with you. And of course, it's Cruz Ramirez. Now, Lightning isn't too happy about that because he doesn't really like her at first. So, they start doing races, and of course, in order to track McQueen's speed, Cruz has to stay close to McQueen, and she doesn't really know how to get up to speed that well, especially on the beach, and she keeps failing a bunch of times. It's hilarious. Until finally, they complete the training, I guess, and he still hasn't beaten Jackson Storm's record speed, and so he decides to go to another racetrack where Doc once ran, and it turns out it's a demolition derby, and Cruz and Lightning end up in the whole thing facing off against that evil bus named Miss Fritter and a bunch of other demolition cars. And in the end of it, Cruz ends up winning, but Lightning isn't too happy because they just wasted their night in a demolition derby, and he really doesn't like the fact that he has to watch out for her when she has to be training him. And then they have a big argument, and then Cruz admits to Lightning that she actually wanted to become a racer, and when she got to her first race, she got scared, and she was like, I can't do this, so she backed out, and so she decided to become a trainer. And then Cruz leaves Lightning, and so he contacts Mater, and then they have a talk about what he should do, if he should keep racing or not. And then Mater comes up with the idea about Lightning trying to find Doc's old mentor, Rusty. Or, no, not Rusty. Smokey. That's the name. That's the name of the old car who taught Doc. So, he sets out to find Smokey, but of course he has to go get Cruz back, because he thinks that since Cruz wants to be a race car, he thinks that she can. So, he convinces her to come along in a rather ridiculous way. He actually does the dancing that Cruz wanted him to do earlier in the film. And, of course, when Cruz won the demolition derby, she got a trophy, but Lightning broke it. And then he fixed it just using a few patches of black duct tape, which is apparently enough to convince her to come back with him. So they go to Thomasville in Georgia, which is really the main place where Doc used to race and train. And then they eventually find Smokey, and then they go to this bar and have a few drinks, and they meet up with all the old racing legends that Doc used to race with, like with Midnight Moon, Lewis Barnes something, I don't know. And then Smokey realizes that that Lightning isn't there to have a drink. And also, during that time, they talk about Doc's glory days of racing. And, as I said, Smokey figures out that he's not there for a drink, he's there for help. And so Lightning tells him about Jackson Storm, and Smokey says, you can't be faster than him, but you can be smarter than him. And then they have another whole conversation about Doc, about how, and Lightning says that racing was what made him happy. But then Smokey says that's not what made Doc happy. he opens a garage shed, and it turns out Doc was actually sending Smokey letters of him and McQueen training, and Smokey reveals to Lightning that it was actually McQueen that made Doc happy, getting to train him for racing. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, that's really a heartfelt moment. And so they begin training. Cruz kind of gets an upgrade to look like Jackson Storm, along with a new motor for her, so she can go faster. They train. They don't really get much progress, and then Lightning has to go to Florida for the Florida 500. While he's racing, about halfway through the race, or about a quarter of the way through the race, Lightning overhears in his headset built into him, saying that, of course, Mr. Sterling's there, and he says that Cruz has to go back to the training center to train someone else for another race, and Cruz doesn't want to go back because she wants to see Lightning try his best. But Sterling, being her boss, says you have to go back and that you will never be a racer. You're a trainer. That's all you'll ever be. And then once all the racers go into the pits, Lightning decides to bring Cruz back to the stadium, and he decides to put Cruz into the race to replace him, because he knows that he can't beat Storm even if he tries. So Cruz goes out for McQueen. Of course, they have to make Cruz an official race car because she doesn't have the 95 number on her side. So Ramon just spray paints it fast onto her, and she fills in McQueen's place. And then McQueen starts guiding Cruz how to do the race, and she eventually makes her way up to second place, right behind Jackson Storm. And then McQueen tells Cruz what to do about what Smokey taught him about, like, tailing Jackson Storm, like, literally right behind him, and then wait for the right moment to gun it, and then go right past him, which eventually she does do that, and she gets the best of Storm. She tries to pass him, but Storm is like, you are not winning this, I am. And then he scrapes her against the barrier of the racetrack, and he says, you don't belong here, and neither does McQueen. And she then realizes, yes, I do belong here, and she does a flip right over Jackson Storm, which was actually a move done by Doc Hudson in a good race against a rookie. So she jumps over him, she passes him, and she wins the race. Now, Sterling, when Lightning said that she has to go in for him, he was pissed, and he's like, you can't do that. And of course, they ended up doing that. And when she wins, Sterling's like, wow, I was actually wrong about you. You do have the potential to be a racer, and I want you to race for me. But then, the owner of Dynaco, Mr. Tex, stops the conversation. He says, no, I want you to race for me. Dynaco has a good history of good racers, unlike Bobby, which was a joke that was said also previously in the film. And the guy, Bobby, was actually there, and he's like, I can hear you, you know. So McQueen is happy that Cruz won, but unfortunately, since he didn't complete the race, that means he has to retire. But just as Sterling says that, the leaderboard pulls up and shows that it wasn't actually just Cruz Ramirez that won the race. Lightning also won too. And this was the part of the movie that a lot of people really don't get and hate. they think that McQueen, they think McQueen didn't win the race because he didn't complete it, which is true, but the fact that Cruz and McQueen were on the same team, and since they were both in the race, and since they were basically just, you know, for the same sponsor and all that sort of stuff, I guess, McQueen did technically also win. So Lightning gets to keep racing, and Cruz gets a dealership of becoming the new sponsor of Dynaco. Which, by the way, early in the film, Bobby also retired from racing, so the spot was open for Cruz. She takes it, and she becomes the official new race car for Dynaco. And Lightning decides, oh yeah, I'm going to keep racing. However, I'm not entirely sure what that meant. I've talked it over with my family. They say that he is going to stay in the racing business. He's just not going to actually race anymore, which is actually really disappointing because that's what the whole Cars franchise was about. Well, except the second film, but I'm not going to go into the second film because that film's been out for 6 years, so we don't have to we don't have to go over the second film. So at the very end of the film, Cruz is dressed up in her new Dynaco uniform, and her number is number 51 to honor Doug Hudson, as that was his number when he was racing, number 51. And then Lightning McQueen shows up, and he is dressed like Doc Hudson. And on his sides, it says the fabulous Lightning McQueen, also to honor Doc Hudson. And Lightning McQueen then announces that he is going to be training Cruz in racing, and it's actually kind of a nice thing, because in the first film, Doc was training McQueen when he was the rookie, and now in this film, Cruz is the rookie, and Lightning is taking on the place of Doc to train her for new races. Eventually, and in the end, everyone has a happy ending, and it was a really good film. Although one thing I didn't get, after Cruz beat Jackson Storm, when she crossed the finish line, we never saw Storm again. And that leads me to the question, what happened to Jackson Storm? I bet he was probably furious that he lost, and I bet that if they did show him, he would be like, how is this possible? She's not meant to be a racer. How did she beat me? And then he starts throwing a tantrum. Of course, this is all my prediction, as I said. And then he just drives off, can't believing what he had done. And, yeah. So, all in all, guys, I have to say, this is actually a really good film. A lot of people, or some people out there say, don't watch it, it's the worst film ever made. I disagree. It's actually a really nice film. So I highly suggest you checking out Cars 3 in theaters now in 3D, or when it comes to DVD and digital in the future. And one thing that really stood out to me, Super Mario Logan, who, of course, you guys know, I do reactions to every video he makes now, he actually hates Cars 3. And what's surprising is, he hates it even more than Big Hero 6, which also is kind of shocking, because Big Hero 6 was also a really good film. So, I don't know what is going on in Logan's head, because Cars 3 and Big Hero 6 were very good films, and they were made by Disney. So, what is going on in your head, Logan? I honestly don't understand. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in for this second edition of Movie Reviews with Bmanlegoboy. Make sure to go check out Cars 3 in theaters now, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, my YouTube comrades.